And today we have the honor of speaking with the one, the only Dr. Leemon Baird. How you doing today, Dr. Leemon?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We've known each other for a couple years now. I'm so incredibly excited to welcome you onto the show today. You've done some amazing things in the world of cryptography and technology and blockchain. There's no way I could summarize that. So if you would, for people who maybe aren't totally familiar, maybe you could share your story of how you really got into this space and maybe bring us to the point of where you are now, and what you're working on.
Oh, sure. Well, I got here the obvious way. I played. I like math problems. And so there's a fun math problem. Could you have computers come to an agreement and do it fast and secure? It wasn't because I wanted to build anything. It was just a fun math problem. And I worked on that for several years and then suddenly realized, oh, you just add two hashes and it gives you your whole history and then you get consensus for free. And so you can have speed and security at the same time. It could be ABFT, really secure, but also be really fast. And so Mance Harmon, we've been starting companies for 20 years. We've known each other since the early 90s. Wow, half our lives. And we said, hey, let's start a company to do that. And so Hedera is this. We said, you really need to have good governance. Having good technology isn't enough. You really have to have good governance. And so we got some of the biggest companies in the world, all around the world, to be governing. And so we started Hedera, and we've got people all around the world as governors that you know who they are. They have a reputation to protect, and they keep tabs on each other, keep each other honest. So that's Hedera.
So I kind of want to take a step back for a second and talk about the underlying technology of what makes it different, because you invented it. I mean, you're a pioneer in the space. So maybe we could talk a little bit about like what it actually is and what makes it unique from, say, another big blockchain out there that, I'll leave that to the imagination of which others.
Sure. So a ledger, a blockchain, a distributed ledger technology, a DLT, all this is a bunch of computers that have to agree on what order we do transactions. Transactions can be anything that manipulates the information it's storing. So you could have a cryptocurrency and it just remembers who has how much of it. Or you could have tokens and it remembers who has them. Or it could run little programs for you. But the important thing is to get the order right. Because if I only have one token and I send it to you, but I also send it to somebody else, those two transactions, it matters which one was first. Because the first one will work. By the time the second one happens, well, I don't have the token anymore, so it doesn't work. So we have to know the order. So it's all about having a group of computers come to an agreement on the order. The problem, of course, is you shouldn't trust anybody. No one person. You have to end up trusting that the group as a whole will be mostly honest, or most of the hashing power in the world is known to you, or something about the group as a whole you have to trust. But you don't have to trust any particular computer. And so a bunch of the computers can be evil and they can't affect you at all. This is what ledgers are. The earliest one, with Bitcoin, what they invented was the idea was, tell you what, we'll all take turns. All these computers will just take turns adding new transactions onto the list of transactions. It's like a stack of these. Actually, what we'll do is we'll have a whole group of transactions, a block, and we'll just keep putting the blocks on top of each other like a stack of blocks. And that works, assuming everybody knows which ones go next. So if you try to add a block and I try to add a block at the same time, we have to know whose is first. And if we're millions of people all adding a block at the same time, I don't know how you would ever sort out that mess. So what they said was, well, we'll solve really hard math problems on our computers, so hard that all the computers on Earth, only one every 10 minutes, can win the puzzle, can solve the puzzle and win the prize, and that computer has the right to add the next block. So every 10 minutes, we get a new block on. And so maybe after an hour, you're pretty sure that the stack has grown up and somebody who tried to branch off, their branch has died. So maybe after 6 confirmations, after an hour, you can trust it. So you can put in your transaction and after an hour, you can trust it. You can only do a few a second, which makes them really expensive, but you can do it and it works. And now you have this system where you don't have to trust any one person. No one's in charge. Then other people said, well, let's make it faster. Tell you what, the most efficient way of running something is a dictatorship. So we'll have a leader, one computer that's in charge, and it will tell everybody what order the transactions are in. And then we'll just take turns being the dictator. And we'll maybe go around the circle, or maybe we'll pseudo-randomly choose. The problem is, if you have a leader, It may not be fair in how the transactions get ordered and which ones get left out, but even worse, what if attackers have a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack? They've compromised computers all over the internet and they flood that one computer with packets. That one computer won't be able to talk to anybody. And you could say, well, that doesn't matter because in a few seconds we'll have a new leader. Yeah, but the attacker can play follow the leader and follow the new leader and keep following the leader around and keep the whole network shut down for as long as they feel like shutting down one computer at a time. That's a real problem. If you have a leader-based system, this is an inherent problem. And a bunch of people have done leader-based systems. And it's a problem. You can have DDoS attacks and they can shut it down. Now, of course, you're never totally secure. If you can compromise every computer on the network, then every system is unreliable and unbelievable. If you can hide lots of hashing power in your basement, maybe a major world government could do that, then the whole network can be compromised. If you can DDoS and shut down every single computer, well, then of course the whole network freezes because there's no computers to run. But what we want to do is protect against someone who isn't able to do that much. If they can only shut down one computer at a time or a handful of computers at a time, it should have no effect on the network. With a leader-based system, it destroys the whole network. The whole network freezes. There's no progress whatsoever. So what we have is totally different. Every computer is essentially making up new blocks and new transactions all the time at the same time. We don't take turns. And they tell everybody else what they've made up. And everybody gets it. And we do it in the simplest way possible. Random gossip. That just means that each computer, when it has a message, picks another computer at random and tells them. And then picks another one at random and tells them, and so on. And each of those picks someone at random and tell them. And it spreads like gossip in a school or in an office. It's just spreading at the rate of gossip. The rumor mill is the most efficient communication on earth. And that's how it works. Every computer can be adding new transactions at the same time. They tell everybody else just by this gossip protocol, so it's really fast. Nothing is more resilient than that. You shut down a few computers, we don't care. Everything just keeps going. There is no leader, not even for a moment, not even randomly chosen, never a leader, just everybody does their own thing. And whenever you tell someone a message, you add two little hashes to that message, two little indications saying, oh, by the way, here's the last message I created, and here's the last message I received. That's it. Every time you send someone a message, you also just put this little note at the bottom saying, here's the last message I created, here's the last one I received from someone else. And once you've collected all the messages, they're like puzzle pieces. They can fit together because of those two hashes. You can put them together into a graph, connected by their hashes. We call it a hash graph. And by looking at it, every computer knows exactly how the information flowed through the network. They say, well, your transaction went to Alice and Bob, and then Alice sent it to Carol, and Bob sent it to Dave and Ed, and you can just see the entire history. And given that, you know when the transaction reached half the world. And then you can put the transactions in order by when they reached half the world, and you're done. You have consensus on the order, no leader, no hard math problems to solve, not even any communication with each other about consensus. You just send out the actual transactions themselves with these two hashes at the bottom. No communication about the consensus, and yet everyone has an agreement and it just works really fast. So it's basically as secure as you could possibly be. ABFT, asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant, which means it's good against DDoS attacks on one computer or a small number of computers at a time. And it's as fast as the internet could allow. You're not going to get any faster than that in an ABFT system. So that is the idea. And we don't have to solve these hard math problems, which means we don't use a lot of electricity. Bitcoin uses more electricity than Ireland. We don't have to do that. We use almost no electricity at all. And there have been these reports that say we use less than anybody else.
That's incredible. So when it comes to actual like speed of the network and bandwidth, because I feel like what we're seeing right now, especially with games coming online, is we need a significant amount of bandwidth. We need to have a ridiculous number of transactions at a reasonable cost in order to play games. So what are those on Hedera? Like, what does that actually look like in more of like the tech spec arena?
Yes. So for games, you need this, and you need it in lots of different ways. And we can talk about all the different kinds of ways games can use ledgers. And Hedera is just absolutely set up for this. So first of all, you need to be able to do many different transactions every second. So I told you that Bitcoin does 7 a second. We do 10,000 a second. We've slowed it down to 10,000 a second. And when we get close to that limit, we'll raise it to several thousand. And when we need to, we can even go to multiple groups of computers, multiple shards. There's no limit to how fast you can get. But we're extremely fast. You also need to know your answer right away. You can't wait an hour to know for sure that your transaction went through. Instead, within less than a second, you're very sure that the computer you gave it to has it. And within a few seconds, you have finality. It is final. Every computer has it. Every computer knows it. Every computer knows what order it was in history. Every computer knows whether it went through or didn't. If I tried to give my one coin to both Alice and Bob, every computer knows which of the two got it and which of the two it failed for. You need that kind of speed. And that is for things that are stored on the ledger, like NFTs we'll talk about, that you would use in your game. You can also have the game itself flowing through the network. And you can do it directly, or you can use this network, Hedera, to give you the trust while you run a private network. You can take the transactions of your private network and flow it through the big network. And that really looks good for games. You can have your game servers using this to add trust, or you can even have groups of participants that are playing a game together, forming just temporarily while they're playing, forming their own network that is feeding the transactions through Hedera and getting consensus through Hedera. Or even doing consensus with each other and then occasionally sending something through Hedera to record it. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but they all come down to you need extreme speed, and honestly, you need security. It's not just games. Games are not just all fun and games. They are serious. You can say, well, it's just a game. Until someone cheats against you, then it's not just a game, it matters. Or until you've spent huge amounts of money to buy some in-game asset, then it matters. Games are sort of a microcosm of the real world. And so you need security. You don't want your game crashing or being shut down by DDoS attacks. You don't want someone to be able to steal your in-game assets, especially if you paid real world money for it. That's a real thing. And so you need the trust of something like Hedera, but you also need the speed. You really need both for games. You really can't get away with just one.
So let's talk about how you view the future of the metaverse and gaming, and why, as a co-founder of this brilliant technology and a pioneer in this space, there are probably a trillion problems you could be tackling. Why reserve this amount of bandwidth for games in the first place?
Well, of course, the ledger is good for more than just games. But I think
I just meant mental in your own mind. Yeah.
yes, I think games are important because they're important to human beings, and human beings are important. I read this great book. It was a history of the wars that had happened in EVE Online. And he was not an anthropologist looking at the monkeys. Oh, isn't it funny? They play games. And he wasn't a computer scientist saying, oh, here's how they got the computers to work. It was actually a history book. He was recording those wars because they happened with tens of thousands of real human beings who invested years of their life into it. That makes it important because humans are important. And those wars in EVE Online aren't a simulation of history. They are history. They are actually something that has happened in the history of this planet that impacted a number of people and was significant to a number of people. And I think in the future, this is what we're going to view. If people are into something, then because they're of value, it is of value. So why do I put mental effort into this stuff? Because of that. People matter, and this is one part of people's lives. And there are other parts. You care about your privacy, and we can work on that. And you care about your day-to-day life being convenient because you can do new kinds of buying and selling easier and cheaper. And you care about that. You want to buy a house easily. You want to care about that. But you also care about games. And so games are important, just like those things. And Hedera can help with all those different things. And I can talk to you about all those things. I would love to talk to you about all those things. But I think games would be fun to talk about today.
Totally.
So, I don't know. You asked why is it important? That's why it's important. And I have a lot of different ideas about how games... Oh, the metaverse. You asked me how about the metaverse. Let me tell you about the metaverse. Everybody means something different by that word. Pretty sure it involves VR. Everybody seems to agree that. I think VR is really cool. And of course, AR and VR put together, XR. I think the future is you'll have very light sunglasses that you wear that give you a VR experience, complete virtual reality, but they also have cameras that will give you a feed through and let you see the real world. And then you're seeing the real world. And they could be your glasses. You know, if you have nearsighted or farsighted, they could fix it. And then in addition, they could overlay information from your phone on the world. In the future, no one's going to be walking around staring at their hand all the time like we do today. Instead, they'll be staring off into empty space because that's what their glasses are showing them. Much better. That's today's world. Oh, and even better, it'll be even more addictive than your phone, which is hard to imagine. I think I would die without my phone. But this is the world we're heading towards. So VR and AR and stuff. So then the question is, are we going to be in a utopia or a dystopia? Is this world going to live on a single computer run by a single company whose best interests are not aligned with yours and doesn't really care about your best interests? This is a question. This is a significant question. Or is it going to end up being millions of different little worlds that people share these little worlds? There are shared worlds of all sorts, big ones and small ones, public and private, connected to each other in an interconnected web mesh of different shared worlds. And we use VR and AR just to explore it. That is the future that we are working for. And Hedera has a number of different ways that it can enable that future. But even before we had Hedera, just the hashgraph itself was a company called Swirlds, which is short for shared worlds. This was the vision in 2015 when we started Swirlds. And the way to get to that vision was to start a private ledger company and then start a public ledger company and have Hedera enabling this. But this was the vision before this vision was cool. And I'm so happy that today this vision now is cool.
Me too. Me too. And I actually think it's amazing to hear you talk about all of the different worlds that are interconnected and how it seems like that is the vision that you hold as opposed to one like centralized thing that just is that, because that sounds awful when it's one person that can control everybody and it's full immersion. So they have direct access to like our brain and that's very scary. So I'm very, very glad that all of your genius and everything that you're building is going towards this decentralized world. I actually would opine that the metaverse itself, it already exists in the internet, and it's just going to be rendered more effectively later on through these different worlds, and we'll have portals to jump between and so on and so forth. So if you're seeing this and you're building towards this, then gaming almost seems like a very natural stepping stone to get us there, because it lets people vote for this technology and this vision without having to fully understand it or be a programmer.
Exactly. So games are a microcosm of the world. All the problems that happen in the world happen in games. And so if you're going to solve all those problems, you should solve them in games. And games are a way for people to try out your solutions to see if they work. And games are a way for people to get used to these things and learn about how they work. So we have all these cool things like NFTs going on in the outside world. Well, they need to be in games as well. And they solve the same problems in games that they solve in the outside world. Problems of consensus and enforcing rules. Big problems in the real world. Big problems in games. And so all these decentralized things are doing it. And I agree. We have cyberspace today. We have the metaverse today. And it's called the World Wide Web, and it's called the internet, and it's called, all these things that we have already. However, what we have now are a bunch of websites that are connected to each other. You can click on links to get between them. But the information of a website is owned by that website. And if you go in there, all sorts of ways of tracking you are tracking your every move. And there are very scary websites that will show you just how much you are tracked. You can be going through a VPN and be in incognito mode, and it will absolutely know every time you come back that you're the same person. No question whatsoever. There are so many ways they fingerprint you. So there are these ways that they're taking your information. They control your information. If I play a game on a website and the game information is stored on that website, then they really are the dictators controlling it. It is not exactly a shared world. It's a world that many people are sharing, that they get to use it, but there's this dictator in the middle of it. And I guess you could say the current internet is a bunch of shared worlds with a dictator inside of each world. But that's not really what I mean by sharing. My view of sharing is you can set up a dictator world if you want to, in maybe cases where you want to, but you can also set up a non-dictator world where the rules are enforced and no one person can delete your assets or spy on your assets. You can keep things secret. You can decide what to do with it. You can transport assets from one to another. You can buy and sell assets. A lot of online games actually make it illegal to buy and sell assets in the game. What is up with that? It's like saying living in a country where it's illegal to sell your car. You can buy a car, but you can't sell it. We own it. We're just lending it to you. That's nonsense.
Right.
You should own your life. You should own your data. You should own your privacy. You should own any property you have bought. You should own it, and no one else should be able to take that away from you. And you should have the freedom to buy and sell that, and to go to other games and buy and sell it in those games, and have things that transport across games. And there's real use cases for that. We can talk about that. Even things like avatar fashion. I had another podcast. We talked about that. Big deal. This is a really big deal. And so the World Wide Web is a case of shared worlds and a cyberspace, but it's not the right kind. It's a bunch of little dictatorships. What we want in a metaverse is real shared worlds that are then interconnected in ways where there is no dictator of them all.
So as we see more people realize that this is what's going on in Web3, in the metaverse with blockchain, that's a very appealing offer. Like, I think very few people would say, yeah, that doesn't sound like something I want to be a part of. So eventually, at least to me, it's just a matter of time before everybody adopts all of our technology that we're now building together. And it really feels like we're building it together. At that point, there will be people with significant resources who were the dictators of Web 2 that then move into Web 3 with a lot of resources. How is it then going to still remain open and this really beautiful vision that we've just articulated and painted here? How do we keep that intact even when all of the old regime moves over, because they will?
So if somebody wants to build a walled garden, they can do that. And if it's a really beautiful garden, maybe you'll want to visit it and go in and go out. And maybe you'll even be willing to pay to go visit them. Why not? The important thing is they can't lock you in. That's the important thing. I have no problem with someone who wants to create a botanical garden and they own it and it's trespassing if I go there without their permission. I have to pay $1 to get in. I am perfectly happy with that. But don't lock the gates while I'm inside and try to lock me into your walled garden. So if you want to create social media, you want to create games, you want to create other online things where you have little regions, little worlds, or big worlds, gigantic worlds, Disneyland kinds of worlds. Disneyland is one that's run by a single corporation. That's fine. Just don't lock me in. Let me take my data that I have with you and be able to freely move it to other places. Let me be able to take information from other places and from your place and have them interoperate. Let me be able to wear avatar clothes with designer labels, with NFTs that prove to everyone who sees it that it's genuine, that the owner of Disneyland has no way of erasing it. There's no single entity in that walled garden that can take my assets or destroy my assets or whatever. And we can even have ways of reducing the ability to spy on you. You can replace advertising with micropayments and then create self-sovereign identity. And that allows you to stop them from spying on you. But you have to have the ability for micropayments and for self-sovereign identity. And again, ledgers are what let you do that.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I wanna kind of refocus us back on games in the metaverse and NFTs specifically. So how do you view NFTs as, being who you are? Like how do you view that as just part of the whole ecosystem, and what role and function do they play?
Yes. So let's talk about what an NFT is. It's a non-fungible token. That does not mean 8-bit graphics GIF that I sold for $10 million. Yes, people are selling such things and calling them NFTs, but that's the tip of the iceberg. An NFT is anything of value that is stored in these ledgers. Hedera stores your NFT, and you can create a new NFT very, very cheaply in Hedera, and you can give it to somebody else for 1/10 of a cent. It costs you 1/10 of a cent. You could have $1 million NFT, you give it to someone else for 1/10 of a cent, and you do 10,000 of these transactions per second. Why does that matter? Because now you can start to take anything of value. So it could be in-game assets. That could be something of value. And you own it. And the computer remembers who owns it, not the computer. Hedera, the whole network comes to an agreement on who owns it. And if you want to sell it to somebody, you can do that. And the whole network ensures that the transfer went through without any possibility of cheating. So I'm going to give you some money for your NFT. You give me your in-game asset, your spaceship or your magic sword or something. You give that to me, and I give you some H bars or some US dollars that have been wrapped, or some other kind of a token. Or maybe you give me your spaceship and I give you my sword. I don't know. We do any of these sorts of things. You and I can be strangers. We don't trust each other. And maybe we don't trust the server of whatever online game we're playing right now. Why should you trust them? They might even try to outlaw it like many of the online games do now. Instead, you and I, totally between us, can do this transfer and it's guaranteed. You will not get my money unless you give me the NFT. And I will not get your NFT unless I give you the money. And it's mathematically guaranteed. If you trust most of the ledger to be honest, then you are 100% guaranteed that this transaction is honest. And it is recorded. You can prove that what you said you would do, you did. It is all incredibly secure and so easy and fast. And it can be built into the software and it can be done invisibly without even knowing about it. I told you if you're wearing designer clothes, you have a label, a label. Anybody in VR can create a shirt with a label of some company that's supposedly selling expensive things. How do you know they didn't cheat? Well, with NFTs, my computer could talk to your computer in real time, and I could see in my visor a little note that says this is real. That shirt really was bought from this company. You have real designer clothes in this virtual world, and you have a guarantee of authenticity. And no one can forge it. Somebody was talking about how you can have a Rolex watch, a real one, that you can pair with your phone, and it would create an NFT that represents that real watch. And then, your avatar could have a Rolex, and this NFT would prove it's a real Rolex, and that kind of thing. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about just online economies of these things with very low barriers to entry, very low costs. The whole transfer goes through in a few seconds. Instead of taking days to send someone a wire, you can give them this NFT in just a few seconds, and you get the money in just a few seconds. And there's no possibility of cheating. And it could be $1 million NFT, and you paid 1/10 of a cent to transfer it. This is the future we're getting to, and this is not what our world looks like right now. But ledgers are going to let us do this in the physical world, and they're even more so going to let us do this in the virtual world, in the digital world, the metaverse. This is where we're headed.
I absolutely think so too. To the point where I think the characters that are in games, NFTs for sure, the land NFTs, the items NFTs, but even like different planets that you're traveling to within games, and then the bosses that you're fighting against could be like NPC NFTs. And then yeah, so like what's the logical conclusion of that? Where does that go? What are the real implications of this technology?
Here are the implications. Everything in the universe of real value can be represented as an NFT. Now, if this is Minecraft and we're talking about a chunk of dirt, it has essentially an infinite number of them. I don't think I need an NFT for chunks of dirt. But diamonds are kind of rare. You can have NFTs for the diamonds. And that ensures that one person can't just churn out an infinite number of diamonds. It ensures that a glitch in the game wouldn't let you duplicate your diamonds without permission. It ensures that I could take my diamonds from Minecraft and take them to EVE Online and start selling the diamonds there. Why not? Why can't you have economies spreading across them? And you can only do that with NFTs. So anything that is of value, if you want people to not just be able to make Xeroxes of it infinitely, if you want to have a limited supply, and if it's important who owns it at any given moment, that you and I can't both be claiming to own the same planet in this universe you just talked about. If it's something that only one person can own at a time, and that person has the right to split it up and then can sell pieces of it, but for any given piece, only one person can own it at a time. And the ledger keeps track. Hedera will tell you who owns it. Now, it can be a pseudonym, so it's privacy. You can have privacy in that, but you can never have to argue. You can't say, no, I own it. No, I own it. That never happens. And so just in the real world, we're going to see the same thing. Anything of value is being tokenized. People are tokenizing fine art and wine and gold. People are tokenizing their own time. If you want to have lunch with me, you spend a token. People are tokenizing their own future income. Galaxy is a company. Spencer Dinwiddie, the basketball player, started a company, Galaxy, to help people tokenize things. Everything in the real world will be tokenized. You live in a house that is represented by a token. Why is that better? Because now a title search takes seconds and is practically free instead of taking days or weeks and costing you thousands of dollars. And when you buy a house from someone, you know they have that house, guaranteed. They didn't sell it to someone else 10 minutes before they sold it to you. All of that is taken care of. And if that makes sense in the physical world, it makes sense in the metaverse and in the gaming world and in the virtual world. because anything that is of value, you want to be able to trust. And Hedera ledgers bring trust to these things.
I love that. So, as there's now trust within video games and expansive worlds, the metaverse, what are the implications of that?
If there is trust, you can start doing things like having whole stock markets and things in the game for the game assets. You don't have to worry about whether the game company is rigging the stock market against you. You can even go further, and you can prevent them from nerfing the power of this spaceship you just bought. People spend tens of thousands of real world dollars on a spaceship, and then the developers say, I think it's too powerful, and they nerf it. There are ways of having rules that are enforced by smart contracts and by app nets, which are really faster than smart contracts, that can be enforced. And you can have a guarantee that certain properties will never change. You can have a guarantee there won't be hyperinflation of these things. It allows you to just relax and use these worlds. It also allows us to start building some very powerful software that makes it all basically invisible to you. In the future, people aren't going to think about NFTs and transfers and was it a tenth of a cent? No. You're just going to say, hey, you have something I'd like. I give you this for you. And the other person says, okay, we'll swap. And it happens. And you just take for granted, I can do anything like this, and it's totally secure. If I'm walking down a street and a guy in a dark alley says, hey, I'll sell you this real genuine Rolex for $10. Okay.
Right.
In the future, no one's even going to think. In a virtual world, if I say this, I know I get it, and I know you get the $10, and it's all guaranteed. And even in the physical world, his Rolex, supposedly, should be talking to my glasses wirelessly and being verified without even me knowing that it's going on. NFTs win when they're invisible. You don't even see it. And the same thing for smart contracts, the same thing for identity. You're just going to take it as granted in both the games and in the real world. If I want to enter a bar that says you have to be 21, I don't have to show them my driver's license that has my home address and my exact age and my middle name and all this information. No, my phone, my glasses will just wirelessly talk to them and show them, hey, I am actually over 21, and not tell them a thing more than that. You won't know whether I'm 22 or 23 or 100. You just know I'm over 21. You won't know my name or my mailing address. You'll know exactly what I want you to know. And this will all be invisible. And it's based on things like self-sovereign identity, which is based on a whole bunch of different things that are cryptography and very cool, part of which is revocation lists and the ability to store things with certain guarantees on what you're storing, which is back to ledgers. And Hedera is doing this. People are doing identity things with Hedera. Hedera, these ledgers don't do everything, but they become the foundation for one little piece of absolutely everything you do. Every part of society, every part of gaming.
I love that. When you were talking about you walk up to somebody, they want to sell you something, I almost think that whole process is gonna change. I almost think we're gonna have like we'll program in what we're looking for. Like, hey, I'm looking for this type of watch or that type of sword or this dragon that I can fly around on or whatever. And then as soon as somebody else has that, if you come and like maybe you look at them and your glasses auto detect what they've publicly made available, and maybe the switch just happens instantly without you having to even approach somebody. It can almost make finding the transaction partner way easier and seamless to where it just happens automatically, and it just it's just instant, and it just happens.
Exactly. So today, things like stocks, most things that are of real value, we turn them into stocks. And they have to be traded on stock markets, which have expensive broker fees. And you can't go there. You have to go through a broker. And it's inconvenient and it's slow. And it may even take days to do the matching and settling and clearing and all those things. You're talking about a world where you're just surrounded by the equivalent of stock markets, so much so that they're just invisible. And you're just telling your computer, here's what I want. I would really like a red fire-breathing dragon with these magical properties. And I'm just tell it what I want. And then at some point, there's a little, and I say, I'm willing to pay this much, but no more, or whatever. I bid what I'm willing to pay, maybe. And then just at some point, an alarm goes off and a notification comes up and says, hey, you just bought that dragon. And I didn't even know I was doing so. I just had this order in. And then one day, somebody put in a put their dragon for sale, and it matched, and the computers matched it up, and the transaction went through. I didn't have to know who they were. I don't have to go through a trusted third party. We don't have to worry about how you sue them if they didn't give you what you asked for. I've talked to people who sell things through PayPal, which is a fantastic service, but half the time the buyer says, "Oh, I never got it," even though they did. And then this person had wasted all their time drawing some art, and they don't get paid for their art. That will become impossible. Everything is controlled or is enforced not by a single computer, but by the ledgers themselves. And so you're just in a world where all these transactions happen invisibly, quickly, very cheaply, and with 100% trust. It's actually a pretty different world than we live in right now.
And I think one that we all want, and it's going to be beautiful. So to kind of put this in context on a chronological scale here, or from a chronological perspective, how far away are we from the point where I could just say, okay, I'm ready to go and I'm ready to go play. I just tap a button on my glasses. I'm in the virtual world, whichever one I've chosen to participate in. And I can now, if I want to just create a dragon and fly around, I can just like wave my hands and then it, like that, and the dragon pops up and I'm off. How far away are we from that point where we've hit mass adoption on a global scale? The technology's there from a hardware software perspective, and there's enough there are enough resources in there to have funded all of this, and we're now at this point of like the utopian dream.
We are getting close. So the last part of that vision to come about will be the glasses. I just tried a Vive Flow recently, and I was disappointed. The IPD isn't adjustable, and so it was blurry for me outside the center of the lens. But other than that, it was extremely light. It's like a pair of glasses. The field of view wasn't great, but it was okay. The resolution wasn't great, but it was okay. It was actually something that I could start imagining. That's today. Apple's supposed to come out with a big VR headset, like ski goggles, next year, 2022. And then they're supposedly going to come out with glasses and AR, really light stuff, in 2023. Maybe it'll be good. There's a huge number of companies working on very lightweight glasses. So I do think that we're going to get to where you're thinking. And I'm very excited about that for the hardware. For the software, we're going to see this exponential explosion, and it has already started. So we have people right now starting to bring gaming and ledgers together. And there are a lot of people doing this, like Animoca, big name in games, and Helix. They're working together, and they're creating stuff already for games that are things you wouldn't even think of. For example, they're doing Helix Warp. This is a leaderboard that's hard to hack, that has trust, that you can have trust in the leaderboard. You don't think about it, but when you play games, the leaderboards are stored on one server by one company, and if a hacker gets in, they can manipulate the leaderboard and put their name at the top without having to do anything. It's horrible. It's a really real problem. And if you see that happening, you're just going to stop playing the game. That's not fun, especially for casual games. If the leaderboard is rigged, I'm not going to play. But what they've done is they made a way of doing the leaderboard through Hedera's consensus service. And so you have actual trust, and it actually becomes impossible to manipulate the leaderboard. You would have to actually play the game and win it. Now, maybe you could cheat in the game, and there's ways of getting around that as well. I mean, there's ways of attacking that with ledgers. But they're starting with the leaderboard part. And so in the Helix Warp, they give you trustworthy leaderboards. And things like reputation, we didn't talk about that. It's sort of related to NFTs. But you're going to have trustworthy reputation where people will know that you are really good at whatever, and your level whatever in whatever games. And you can be a pseudonym, you can have privacy, but you can have a reputation, you can enjoy it. And so all of these things are coming where ledgers are making it better. How many years until that exists? That exists now. This is what they're doing now. And I should have mentioned, Helix Warp is not the leaderboard for a game. Helix Warp is the way that Animoca and Helix are working to provide this software to any game maker that wants to incorporate it into their game. And it will just automatically flow through Hedera, very, very cheap, very fast, and will give them security for their leaderboards. And so we're seeing this now. We're also seeing a blurring of the lines between VR and the physical world now. And AR, of course, is a blurring, but there's other kinds of blurring too. I told you about like having a watch that's a physical watch, but you get an NFT with it. I've seen a number of cases lately where people build physical objects and have an NFT. You have a component in the physical world and a component in the virtual world that go together. The same people I talked about, Animoca and Helix, They're doing things for, I would say soccer, but they would say football, for football clubs. So Manchester City and Melbourne FC, I'm assuming they're a really big deal. I was told Manchester was a champion of something. I'm sorry, I don't know much about sports. Um,
Totally
I'm
okay.
Esports, by the way, I think are also going to be growing. We can talk about that. But physical sports, so what they call football is huge. And they're doing NFTs for that. So it's a physical thing, a physical game in the real world, in the physical world, but they're doing NFTs for it that you can then trade that are related to it, which is great. And then the NFTs themselves are redeemable in the future for a fixed number of H bars. No one's done that before. Having a fixed amount of cryptocurrency back in the NFT. That's kind of a new idea. There's a lot of new ideas. Of course, you have stable tokens; those are fungible tokens. But these are stable coins, But these are NFTs that are backed by a fixed number of cryptocurrency of H bars. So people are figuring out really clever things now. This is not years from now. This is now what they're doing. I really think 2021 was the year when we started seeing all of these businesses that have been saying for years, we should do something with that blockchain stuff someday. This was the year when it started happening. And it's an exponential curve. We're going to just see it explode. Every year will be far bigger than the year before. But we saw it this year. We saw the real world, real companies, real people, real startups are all saying yes. You guys in the ledger world were the lunatic fringe for a long time. Now we admit you were right. This is the future. We're on board. And that's what we're seeing.
Huzzah! Finally. That's so that's so inspiring that finally we're starting to see some movement here for people who may be newer to the space, and maybe they're entrepreneurial in nature, or they're gamers, or they're investors, or they're developers, or they're none of the above and they just happen to stumble upon this. How can somebody still participate and still make their own way and carve their own path? For developers, that's a given. That one's easy. For entrepreneurs, you can always start a company. That's kind of a given. That's, I'm not going to say easy, but conceptually it's easy. But for the average person getting in, they know this is an opportunity, they don't want to miss out. How do they participate and not only help to create value in this world, but also to capture it for themselves as well?
Great question. So just go get a wallet and get some NFTs, get some cryptocurrency, play around with it. There are lots of people. Okay, there are the $10 million NFTs, I know. But there are lots of people that are creating NFTs that are kind of fun and they're very cheap and they're just sort of playful. And get some of those. Then you own an NFT. You own something of value that no one on earth can steal from you. It is inherently yours and under your control, which is really cool. With power comes responsibility. Don't lose your keys. Write it on paper, put it in a bank vault, and give it to your friends. But if you can manage that, and actually we have ideas about that too. But yeah, it's the Wild West. Enjoy it. So go get a wallet. If you go to hedera.com/guide, there's a long list of exchanges and wallets and things that you could get. You could get one of those and play around with it. There's lots of others out there that you can do. You can just Google for NFT wallets. It's really easy to get involved. There are exchanges where you just give them your credit card and they give you some cryptocurrency. You can get some H bars. You go to Bittrex, you give them your credit card or your debit card, or probably PayPal. I don't know what all payment methods they take, and then they give you some H bars. Lots of exchanges out there will sell you lots of cryptocurrencies. You could get involved and just play with a little bit of that. Or you could get some NFTs, and you can just Google for people that have cheap or free NFTs. Lots of fun stuff. And some of these NFTs are nothing but a small picture, even low resolution, like an 8-bit art. And they just create it, and you know that it's the only one of its kind, and you can own it, and no one can steal it from you, and you can have it forever. And how much is that worth? I don't know. Maybe it's worth millions of dollars. Maybe it's worth a few pennies. I don't know. But you can get them for free in some places, and I would encourage you to do so. And then if you're just a slightly more adventurous than that, say you're an artist. Well, why don't you create your own NFTs? You can do that. You can do that. So if you Google, you'll find various places like Galaxy that would help you, but other places too that would help you to build your own NFTs. Why not? Do it on Hedera. It's really cheap on Hedera. It's easy to do, and you could create some of your own NFTs. Or fungible tokens. You can create your own tokens and just dip your toe in the water and try it out. You don't have to be an entrepreneur who gets venture capital funding. You can just create stuff. and then maybe you could sell it, or maybe you just play with it. Maybe give it to friends. I would just encourage everyone to play with this. The best way to understand the future is play. And children understand this. Adults sometimes don't. Except I've noticed the most successful adults tend to be the ones that keep playing. When you find something new and interesting, play with it. Look at it from every angle. See what you can do with it. What happens when you turn it upside down? Just play with it. This is the way we learn about the world. And we're about to enter a radically different world. And I don't know what it will look like because we're still building it, but I'm trying to build it so it'll be a good one rather than a bad one. And you can help.
I love that. I love that. So I kind of want to tap into a little bit more of your vision, and I know we're getting close to time here, so I want to really get as much value as we can out of these last couple of minutes. But really, like, can you help us? Can you help paint a picture for us of like what is this world going to look like? I mean, what is it really going to look like, and how can we best prepare ourselves in this transition?
Two different questions. To prepare yourself, do all the things that I'm saying. Learn as much as you can. Watch things like what you're watching right now. I thank you for having this show. This is really what we need for the future, is to learn about all these new technologies, learn about the world we're entering. You don't want to get blindsided by everything being a surprise. You want to know where we're coming. And there's a lot of cool things that we can do. So I would say, you want to know the best thing to do to prepare? Watch this show. Tune in here next time. That's one thing. What is the world going to look like? It's going to look like a very radically different world. Anybody at any moment will just wave their hand and carve out a piece of this cyberspace, a piece of this metaverse that is your own for free. And it's just running on your own glasses, on your own phone. But that's fine. It's a world. It is a world that you own. And you can create things in it. And you can invite friends. And now it's a shared world between you and your friends. And you can create stuff, and you can play games against each other, and you can build a Wikipedia, or you can do whatever you want to do. And then you can interconnect with others. You can invite more and more people, and they can join. They know that you're not the dictator. You could have set it up where you're the dictator, or you could have set it up where you're not the dictator, where you are just interacting. You're all equal and you all vote on things. You can do that. It's entirely up to you. I certainly hope that my vision my image hasn't frozen, but you'll let me know, I'm sure. Good.
You're good. Mm-hmm.
Good. Computers are really bad. Formal methods, that mathematical proofs of computer correctness, that's the way we need to go. That's a different story. We'll talk about that one later. But in this future world, then, you can just easily invite people and have them invite people, and you can make it closed, private, or you can just let it be open. Anyone can come. And the more popular it is, the more people you get. It's like having 1 million people come to your YouTube channel or your podcast. And then you'll be able to monetize? Yes. If you wanted to, you could do it with advertising, and maybe then you have to kind of spy on people, but you can also do it with micropayments, which will be easy to do. You can do it with like Patreon donations. You can do that. You can do other things. You can be selling NFTs and physical things that have been turned into NFTs. There's a lot of ways. People would even maybe pay you to have a video chat with you. This is the kind of future we're talking about. There could even be stock markets where people bid on the ability to have a 5-minute chat with you. All sorts of crazy things you wouldn't even imagine today. And it all just is smooth and invisible. If you lose your phone, there's very easy ways to go to 10 of your friends and have them help you get back all your information. Nothing's ever lost. But a hacker can't get it unless he can compromise 10 of your friends. All sorts of things like this for your security. You're just going to take for granted that all the information about you is in your phone or in your computer in a way that is entirely private. But anytime you want to have someone know a piece of it, I'm over 21, I have a vaccine, whatever, you can just instantly have people know those. And if you want to keep them secret, you keep them secret. And you can play games, and you can buy and sell real physical world things, and you can blur the lines between the two. And you can do your work in this world, and you can socialize with other people. And it's all enabled because you have the trust that comes from the underlying ledger. And that underlying ledger is Hedera to do things like the NFTs. And you're just playing a little game with a group of people. Maybe it's hashgraph or something between you. And then occasionally you talk to Hedera to record some information for posterity. All sorts of interesting models of how we're going to interact. And we're just scratching the surface. We don't even know what this world's going to look like. But it's clear that it's going to be radically different. The change will be as big as the change that the internet made, maybe bigger. Maybe a bigger change in the internet is what we're going to see. And we're right on the verge of it.
I think it's going to be bigger than the internet. I think the internet was kind of like the foundation that was needed for this to now happen, but I think this is going to be radically bigger for humanity than the internet. I really think this is humanity's end game, all pun intended, and I think it's going to be a beautiful one. So I kind of want to scope out for our last couple of minutes, and I want to understand, like, as one of the movers and shifters of the world now. I mean, I don't think that's a hyperbole to say, especially as everything goes more blockchain, and Hedera is only going to become more important to the world and to the critical infrastructure that is powering the metaverse, right? What are you seeing as far as, like, how politics and different world powers that be, and like the real people that are making decisions in the room where it happens, like how much are people going to try to tamper with our world that we're creating, and are we in good hands from the perspective of, okay, there's going to be people are going to try to tamper with it. There's going to be a faction of people that are really good people like yourself who are defending our freedom and fighting for us, the citizens of this new world. Like, are we in good hands, or do we have anything to really worry about? And if we do, what can we do about it?
You should always worry about what the government's going to do. Um, so, yes, being decentralized helps, but if all the world's governments decide to stamp something out, they can make life really hard. So, that would be bad. Right now, at least in most of the countries around the world, they are cautiously embracing this because they realize that if they don't embrace it, they're going to be left behind. And this is really the truth around the world. So in the United States and in Europe and other places and all through Asia, we're seeing countries that are embracing this. They're even talking about taking their national currency and turning it into tokens, which makes a lot of sense. CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, makes a huge amount of sense. But every country is talking about this, and they're taking different paths. There are some countries that say we're going to outlaw everything except for our own crypto, and we'll set up our own crypto. But they're controlling your life anyway, even before this stuff came along. But if you live in a democracy where you can vote, I would recommend you vote. I would recommend you talk to the legislators and say, look, I appreciate that you want to protect us, please do, but don't protect us so much that you end up squashing the very thing that can make our life better. And right now, I do hear noises coming out of Washington that says, we really do want to encourage these things. And we're seeing good signs in Europe, and you have great things in Singapore and South Korea, and just all sorts of good places. But if you're in a country that allows you to vote, you need to vote. You need to tell your representatives, I want this kind of a utopia, not the dystopia that is absolutely possible. You better believe it's possible. I want you guys to enable us to do the good things. I want you to give us more privacy, not less. I want you to empower us to reduce the friction of all of our interactions, not increase it. I want you to allow us to avoid spying. I want you to allow us to build the things that the technology allows. Let it blossom. And that's what we need to do. We need to build the future we want. It's not inevitable, but boy, it looks like we can have it, and we need to do it. We need to talk to our governments and get it.
I love it. Dr. Leemon, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I know all the listeners and watchers do as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's been so good to be here. And thanks to all the people out there that are helping to build the future. I just really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
I love it. We're going to end the stream now. So thank you again to everybody who's watching and listening. Thank you, Dr. Leemon, and we'll see you.